I sat on the bathroom floor, the cold tiles pressing against my spine, an IV still stitched into the crease of my arm. A drop of blood slipped from the edge of the bandage and landed on the wristband they gave me at the oncology ward. Name, John. Age, 35. Diagnosis, stage 3 lymphoma. The front door had just closed. I didn't have to get up to know it wouldn't open again. Sophia had taken her suitcase at 6 a.m. She said she just needed fresh air. Said she'd be back with breakfast. She left the key on the hallway table beside the bottle of nausea pills I hadn't opened yet. I stared at the note she'd scrawled on the back of a receipt. "You need to focus on yourself now. I can't carry this with you." But she carried my credit cards with her, and my last 3 months of savings. And when I opened my laptop, I saw her mistake. Her messages were still open. She hadn't logged out. A string of chats with someone saved as DM. He's not going to make it through this. Once I'm out, I'll transfer the money. He won't even know what happened. I stared at those lines longer than I stared at my own biopsy report. She used to hold my hand during scans. Now she couldn't even wait until the second round of treatment started. My throat felt like sandpaper. My chest, hollow. Not from the chemo, that hadn't even started yet. From the silence. The kind of silence that only betrayal can leave behind. The hospital bracelet itched. I tore it off. The adhesive left a welt on my skin. I picked up the phone, still shaking, and called the hospital. "I'm canceling my appointment," I said. "They told me the chemo was ready." I said I wasn't. I packed what I could. My body felt heavier than usual. Not sick, just tired in places people couldn't see. I opened drawers that still smelled like her perfume, closed them again. Everything in the apartment reminded me of someone who had rehearsed love like a performance. The book she never finished, the tea bag she liked arranged by color, the framed photo from our vacation to Dubrovnik, her idea. I didn't know what hurt more, that she left, or that I couldn't even be surprised. I looked in the mirror. A man with circles under his eyes, skin too pale, stubble grown in patches. This is what love leaves when it runs away. For a few seconds, I stood there motionless. Then something inside me snapped into place. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. I called my cousin, Stephen, a lawyer who rarely smiled but always picked up. "Sophia's gone," I said. There was a pause. "What did she take?" he asked. "Everything," I answered. 20 minutes later, he was at my door, laptop open, eyes sharper than ever. "We'll get it back," he said. And I believed him. But more importantly, I decided something else that morning. I wasn't going to die the way they expected me to. Not waiting, not weeping, not begging. The very first thing I did after she left was cancel the chemo. Not forever, just for now. I needed to remember who I was before I let her define what survival looked like. Because I had nothing left to lose, so I decided to live like it. John had always been the dependable one, the kind of man who remembered your birthday even when you forgot his. 35, a tech consultant with a talent for building things quietly, systems, tools, routines. But he never quite learned how to build something for himself. Not emotionally, anyway. He'd spent the last decade giving, lending, carrying. In college, he supported his roommate through addiction. Post-grad, he nursed his father through lung failure while juggling work deadlines. And when Sophia came into his life, it felt like finally, just maybe, it was his turn to be taken care of, or at least not taken from. They met in line at a bookstore downtown. Sophia had been behind him, cradling a biography of a photographer she said changed her life. John had been holding 3 technical manuals and a half-read novel he'd never finish. She asked if the novel was worth it. He told her he hadn't gotten that far. She laughed. He paid for both copies. Sophia was stunning. That type of elegance that made rooms quieter when she entered. She didn't just know how to speak. She knew how to be heard. People listened when she talked about her dreams, even if they changed weekly. Within months, she'd moved into John's two-bedroom apartment. Her voice echoed in every corner. She brought color to his otherwise grayscale world. Throw pillows, candles, French jazz on Sunday mornings. He didn't mind the chaos. He loved the sound of her humming in the kitchen, the way she filled his silences. But it wasn't long before John was footing the bill for everything. She'd arrived with credit card debt and unfinished grad school applications. He paid them off. When her laptop broke, he bought her a new one. When she wanted to take a trip to rediscover herself, he funded the flights. It didn't feel like sacrifice at the time. It felt like partnership. Until the day he collapsed. He'd passed out in the server room at work. No warning, just dizziness, then black. Sophia had been by his side in the hospital. She held his hand through the scans, through the diagnosis, through the initial tears. But when the oncologist mentioned the word years, something changed. She stopped holding his hand, started checking her phone more, started taking longer showers, like she needed space even from air they shared. That's when Stephen entered the picture. Stephen wasn't a warm man. He spoke in clipped sentences, wore pressed shirts even on Sundays, and treated emotion like it was something to be quarantined. But he was loyal. John's cousin and practically his brother since childhood. Where John bent, Stephen stayed rigid. He had always been skeptical of Sophia. One time he said, "She talks like she's applying for a job every time she's around your friends. You don't marry a resume." Stephen had offered to draw up a will after the diagnosis. John said no. "I'm not dying yet," he joked. "That's exactly why you plan now," Stephen replied. After Sophia left, Stephen didn't say, "I told you so." He just showed up at the door with a laptop, a frozen lasagna, and legal documents. "She's not walking away with anything that isn't hers, not this time," he said. Then there was Liza. She and John had grown up in the same neighborhood. She was the soft-spoken girl who spent summers volunteering at animal shelters and winters knitting scarves for strangers. She'd been in nursing school when John was starting his tech career. Their paths rarely crossed. She had always been kind, quiet, just there. She reappeared 3 days after Sophia disappeared. No explanation, just a knock at the door and a container of soup in hand. She said, "You looked cold." "How did you know I was here?" John asked. "Everyone knows. My mom saw the moving van, and I asked." He let her in. She didn't try to make him talk. She just placed the soup down and started cleaning dishes he hadn't touched in 2 days. Over the weeks, she became a fixture. She brought groceries, sat beside him during treatment when he let her. She never gave pep talks, never said, "You've got this," or "Stay strong." Instead, she said things like, "It's okay if today hurts. You don't have to be useful all the time." It was the first time John had been around someone who didn't demand strength from him or repayment. Sophia never returned, not in the way he expected. She posted curated updates on social media, smiling beside new men, holding champagne glasses, tagging vacation spots John couldn't afford even before his diagnosis. He stopped checking after a while. But Gavin didn't. Gavin was the fourth person in John's circle. He wasn't technically a relative, more like an unofficial family addition. Monica's old friend. He worked in media law, and unlike Stephen, Gavin had charm, the kind of man who could be dangerous with a mic and a camera, and a plan. When John finally decided to stop hiding what Sophia had done, it was Gavin who pitched the idea of a mini documentary. "You're not the only one this happened to. You just have a voice most people don't. So you want to make me a sob story? No, I want to make you a wake-up call." And so, quietly, they started. Gavin handled the production. Stephen handled the legal side. Liza helped with scripting moments from John's journal entries. "This isn't about revenge," John had insisted. "Exactly," Gavin said. "It's about reclaiming narrative." And by the time the footage was compiled, hospital scenes, time-lapse shots of John's physical recovery, snippets of him reading his own writing, it had formed something powerful, real. A story not of cancer, but of survival. Not of betrayal, but of becoming whole without needing someone to fill the gaps.
Each of them played a role, not as supporting cast, but as steady pillars in a life that had been shattered and rebuilt. Stiffen once said, "You don't know who people are until you're drowning. Then you see who dives in." John had seen that clearly now. Sophia had run, but the right ones had stayed. John had never suspected the money was missing, not because he was naive, but when you love someone, you stop checking the balance sheet. You assume you're both spending from the same account of trust. But trust, he realized, had overdraft fees too. It started with something small, a notification from his bank about an international purchase, a designer bag bought in Paris, a bag Sophia once joked about wanting but claimed was silly to even dream of. He thought it was fraud, a mistake. He called her. No answer. He texted her.
Sophia had been preparing to leave long before she walked out. The betrayal wasn't spontaneous. It had been scheduled, spreadsheeted, executed like a project plan. By sunrise, he was packed. He left the apartment they once shared and moved into a one-room studio tucked behind an old bookstore. The walls were thin, the windows fogged at the edges, but it was quiet and empty. And that was better than the echoes of someone who had weaponized love for profit. The bed was a cot. The shower dripped. He didn't care. That morning, he stood in front of the mirror and said out loud for the first time, "She doesn't get to write the ending." He dialed Gavin. The last time they'd spoken, Gavin had helped him set up a digital will. Now John's voice was flat, his request colder. "I need you to look through everything, every account, every transaction, every signature." Gavin didn't ask why. He heard the tremor in John's tone. "You'll have everything by tonight. We'll do this quietly." And they did. While John started his first round of chemo, alone, without anyone in the waiting room, without anyone holding his hand, Gavin began his audit. The chemo was brutal. John's body rejected it like it was trying to purge more than just illness. His skin cracked, his bones screamed, his throat was a tunnel of fire. He spent nights curled around the toilet, clutching a towel soaked with sweat. No one texted, no one called. Except Gavin, who would send messages like, "Found another forged transfer. She signed as your medical proxy. I'm sending you documents." Or, "Do not respond to her emails. I'm setting up a firewall." Or, "Hang in there. This is almost done." And Liza, she came by on the third day, not to coddle, but to clean, to make soup, to sit silently in the corner while he vomited into a bowl and muttered apologies he didn't know her. "You don't have to be sorry," she said once. "You didn't do this to yourself." But John felt like he had. He'd chosen her, Sophia. Every day for years, he had chosen her, defended her when others doubted her, justified every red flag, wrote off every slip as stress, trauma, insecurity. He hadn't just been betrayed, he'd been complicit in the illusion. That truth ate more of him than the chemo. One night, around midnight, John finally opened Sophia's Instagram, just once. He needed to see it for himself. There she was, on a yacht, wrapped in the arms of a man he didn't recognize, champagne flute in one hand, captioned, "New beginnings. Some people are just meant to love you the right way." He didn't save the photo, didn't zoom in. He just stared at her eyes. They weren't mourning, they weren't apologizing, they weren't even remembering. That night, he broke down, not because he missed her, but because she never existed in the way he thought she did. The next morning, he cut off all notifications, logged out of every platform, burned a printed photo of them from 2 summers ago. And when he called Gavin again, his voice was different. He said, "Don't just audit, build a case. I want this public, not for revenge, but for proof." Gavin didn't hesitate. "We'll start with the insurance fraud. That'll be enough to make it stick." John agreed, but in truth, he didn't care about court. He didn't want her to go to prison. He didn't want to see her suffer. He just wanted to make sure she couldn't lie to anyone else the way she'd lied to him. That week, while Gavin handled the legal end and Liza quietly organized John's treatment schedule, John began to write. He filled an old leather notebook with moments, raw, undiluted. Not stories, just wounds mapped in words. The day she forgot his appointment.
The moment she rolled her eyes when he cried in the car. The night she told him, "Strong people don't talk about pain." Each page bled until he stopped shaking. He didn't tell anyone he was writing, not even Liza. But every word pulled him closer to someone he hadn't been in a long time. Himself. By the time the second chemo cycle started, he walked into the hospital on his own. No cane, no handler, just determination. The nurse asked if he had someone waiting. He said, no. But in his head, he whispered, not anymore, and not again. The second round of chemo was worse than the first. By the third week, John couldn't tell if the pain came from his body or his memory. His scalp itched constantly, even as the hair detached in tufts. Every time he looked in the mirror, he saw a ghost of someone who once had control. Even breathing felt like a task he had to remember on purpose. His appetite disappeared. Water tasted metallic. Chicken broth made him gag. He kept crackers by the bed, but even those reminded him of hospital trays and pity. He stopped responding to texts. Even Gavin's updates on Sophia's fraud case went unread. The legal system could wait. The world could wait. He felt like dying, not out of despair, but exhaustion. And yet, he still took his meds every night, until the night he didn't. It was 2:12 a.m. The apartment was dark. A full glass of water sat untouched on the nightstand beside a row of prescription bottles. He picked up the largest one, unscrewed the cap, and stared at the pills inside. He held it over the trash can. His arm stayed frozen. "What are you doing?" He turned around. Liza stood in the doorway, wrapped in a cardigan, her hair in a loose braid. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "How'd you get in?" he asked quietly. "You gave me a spare key, remember? Back when you thought you might fall in the shower?" He looked down, suddenly ashamed. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." "That's okay." She walked over, gently took the bottle from his hand, and set it back on the table. "You don't need to be strong for anyone. Just be real with someone." That sentence hit deeper than any IV ever had. He didn't cry. Not that night. But he let her stay. Liza didn't talk much. She made tea, sat on the floor, pulled a blanket over her legs, and started reading from a battered novel she found on his shelf. Her voice was soft, steady, without performance. It was the first time in days that John stayed awake through an entire hour without nausea or panic. She stayed until morning, left when he fell asleep. After that, she came by more often, never uninvited, just unannounced. Sometimes she brought soup, other times just her company. They didn't talk about the past, they didn't try to fix anything. They just coexisted, quietly, patiently. It was a different kind of closeness, not romantic, not loaded, just two people, sitting in the wreckage of their own lives, helping each other breathe. John learned that Liza had lost her brother to an overdose 3 years ago. She'd been the one to find him. She said that's when she decided to transfer into trauma nursing. Not to save people, she told him, just so someone could be there when no one else was. That made sense. They watched old films together. She taught him how to eat toast with cinnamon when his stomach rejected everything else. She massaged his hands when the chemo caused nerve pain. She even shaved his head one afternoon, quietly, gently, while he sat on a stool, pretending not to flinch. Meanwhile, Sophia continued broadcasting her new life. A friend of Gavin's sent John screenshots once a week. He didn't ask for them, but they came anyway. There she was, drinking wine in Mykonos, dressed in white, posing on a yacht beside a new man with slicked back hair and a fake smile. Her captions were polished. Learning what peace really looks like. Healing happens when you stop looking backwards. John wanted to throw the phone, but he didn't. He didn't comment. He didn't message. He didn't even tell Gavin to stop sending updates. He just watched. Because he wasn't angry anymore, not the way he thought he'd be. He was done performing fury for people who'd never apologize. This time, he whispered to himself one night, "I'm not wasting my breath. I'm letting time expose everything." He got used to the rhythm of pain. He learned which meds worked and which ones didn't. He created a playlist to help him fall asleep, started journaling again, not to publish anything, but to remind himself he was still a person. Some days were unbearable. On those days, he let them be. He stopped pretending. Liza made a habit of checking in every evening after her shift. She'd sit cross-legged on the couch, sipping tea, listening to his silence like it was a full conversation. "You know, you're not the same person you were with her," she said one night. "How so?" "You're quieter, but less afraid." John nodded. He wasn't sure if that was growth or simply numbness, but he appreciated the observation. They never crossed any romantic boundary. She never tried to kiss him. He never reached for her hand. That wasn't what this was. It was deeper, or maybe simpler. One afternoon, John found an old photo album in a storage box. Pictures of him and Sophia at music festivals, on road trips, at that ridiculous cooking class they both pretended to enjoy. He sat on the edge of the bed, flipping pages slowly. When Liza walked in, she didn't say anything. She just sat beside him, handed him a lighter, and opened the window. They burned the album together, piece by piece, memory by memory, until only ashes remained. John didn't feel free, but he felt lighter. That same week, Gavin called. He said, "We've got her on 6 counts. Fraud, identity theft, misuse of medical power of attorney. It's enough for a civil case, possibly even criminal." John didn't react. He just said, "Do what you have to." And then he put the phone down, took his meds, and went to bed early. Because the truth was, Sophia had already lost. Not in court, but in life. She lost the version of him who would have spent the rest of his days trying to make her happy. She lost the home they built, the loyalty he gave so effortlessly. She lost the man who would have died for her. And in losing that, John realized he didn't need to win. He just needed to outlive the story she wrote for him. Gavin called early, too early.
The next morning, he walked to the balcony of his tiny apartment, carrying a camera bag. Not a professional rig, just something simple. He set the tripod, adjusted the light, and sat in front of it. He pressed record. His voice cracked, even in the first sentence. "Hi, my name's John. I have lymphoma. The woman I loved left me the morning after I was diagnosed." He paused. "And this is not a story about her." That was how the idea for the documentary began. No script, no funding, just truth. Each day, John recorded something raw. One episode was about the first chemo and the nausea that stole his sense of taste. Another was about learning to walk again without dizziness. He filmed his meds laid out by time, the bruise on his wrist from failed IVs, the silence of the nights where no one called. He didn't name Sophia, didn't slander her. He just told his story. The betrayal was there between the lines, but it wasn't the star. He titled the project, "Still Here." When Gavin asked him why he didn't focus on exposing her more directly, John replied, "I'm not interested in burning her down. I'm building something for people who've already been burned." He began receiving messages. First, just a few. People who had been left mid-treatment, ghosted after diagnosis. One woman said her husband left the day after she lost her hair. Another said she'd been dumped the night before surgery. They didn't want revenge. They just wanted to be seen. John showed the messages to Liza one evening. She read each one carefully, her expression tight with emotion. "You're doing something bigger than survival. You're letting people breathe." That night, Liza offered to help him edit. She didn't ask to be featured. She just wanted the footage to look better, cleaner. John agreed, and the two of them spent hours in silence, side by side, trimming scenes, adjusting audio, captioning dialogue. When Gavin sent her first lawyer letter, an informal cease and desist, claiming emotional harassment, Gavin sent a response that shut it down within 24 hours. "She knows she can't win this. She's hoping you'll flinch." John didn't. Instead, he posted a new video. Just his face, no music, no edits. This isn't about revenge. This is about reclaiming identity. People think sickness makes you weak, but I've never known strength like the kind I found when everyone left. The video went viral within days, not on the big platforms, but in patient circles, forums, subreddits. Liza printed a comment one night and taped it to John's fridge. It read, "You're the reason I got out of bed today." That meant more than any apology Sophia could have written. More than money, more than court. Meanwhile, Gavin was preparing the official deposition. They were filing the lawsuit not just for damages, but to create public precedent.
to protect other patients. Sophia's legal team stalled, denied, then counteroffered a settlement. John refused. He said, "We go public. We show how easy it was for her to do this, how broken the systems are, and how easy it is to be left behind." Gavin nodded. John's next scan was clean. No signs of spread. A few nodes still needed monitoring, but the doctor's voice was cautiously optimistic. "You're responding better than expected," she said. "Must be the stress relief," John joked. But really, it was something else. He wasn't fighting to live anymore. He was living while fighting. That made all the difference. The day before the public hearing, Sophia posted a cryptic story. People love to paint villains when they're too afraid to admit they hurt themselves. John didn't reply. Instead, he posted another video. This one ended with a simple message, his voice quieter than usual. "She forged my name, but I'm the one who's learning how to write again." Sophia's downfall didn't begin in court. It began online. The lawsuit filing had been made public just 48 hours earlier. Gavin, always one step ahead, had pushed it through a journalist he trusted, someone who knew how to break sensitive stories without sensationalism. The article dropped on a quiet Wednesday morning. Cancer patient accuses ex of insurance fraud and identity theft. Documents confirm forged signature. It included anonymized case documents, bank records, and excerpts from John's testimonial recordings, his voice transcribed beneath a still frame from one of his Still Here videos. The post racked up tens of thousands of shares in under 12 hours. By evening, Sophia's name was trending, not because of curated beauty posts or influencer collabs, but because of one simple, searing quote. "She filed for 80 grand while he filed for chemo." Sophia went silent for a full day. When she resurfaced, it was through a rehearsed video. She wore neutral tones, sat against a pale background, and wiped a tear from the corner of one eye with the precision of someone who practiced in front of a camera. "I never intended to hurt anyone," she said softly. "The relationship was already ending. I thought I had consent. Everything happened so fast. I just wanted closure and support after years of giving." The comments were split at first. Some sympathized. Others hesitated. Then someone leaked the audio. It wasn't Gavin. It wasn't John. It was likely someone from the legal side. Someone sick of watching abusers paint themselves as survivors. The recording surfaced late at night, and by morning it was everywhere. Sophia's voice, unmistakably hers, saying, "He's done. He won't survive past next year anyway. Let's enjoy what's left of his savings." The internet's patience evaporated instantly. Influencer contracts were dropped, brand deals canceled, public apology requests poured in, and Sophia, suddenly cornered, deleted her account. John didn't gloat. He didn't repost. He didn't even open the link. He just sat at his window with a cup of weak tea and stared out over the city skyline fogged in the pale morning light. Liza came in, balancing 2 bags of groceries. "She's gone," she said, unloading bread and eggs. "Good," John replied. A pause. "You don't sound relieved." "She's not worth a reaction anymore." The same day, John received an email from the Regional Cancer Foundation. They had seen his documentary. They were hosting a national awareness event in 2 weeks. They wanted him to speak. John stared at the message for a long time. Speaking in public wasn't new to him. He'd done presentations, client pitches, technical briefings. But those had all been with hair, strength, and the safety of neutrality. Now he was bald, pale, scarred from surgeries and IV lines. Public speaking wasn't just exposure now. It was vulnerability. He wrote back one line. "I'll be there." The venue was a converted opera house. Red velvet seats, golden trimmings, camera crews. The event was called Voices of Survival. Backstage, he stared into the mirror, not to check his appearance, but to acknowledge it. He saw everything, the sunken eyes, the missing eyebrows, the lines that hadn't been there last spring. He saw strength too, quiet, unpolished, undeniable. Liza stood behind him, straightening the collar of his plain white shirt. "You ready?" she asked. He gave her a slight smile. "I don't know, but I'm here." When they called his name, the applause was polite at first. Many didn't know who he was, just another slot on the program. Then he stepped into the light. The cameras clicked, phones raised. Some recognized his face from Still Here. Whispers moved through the crowd like sparks on dry wood. He walked up to the podium slowly, not out of weakness, but deliberation. He placed both hands on the sides of the lectern, took a deep breath, looked into the sea of strangers, and spoke. "My name is John. I'm 35. I have lymphoma. 3 months ago, my partner left me the morning after I was diagnosed. She said she couldn't carry this with me. Then she emptied my account, forged my signature, and told someone I'd be dead within a year. No dramatics, no anger, just facts, delivered like stones across a still lake. I started recording my recovery not to expose her, but to keep myself from disappearing. Turns out, a lot of people know what it feels like to be abandoned at their lowest. More than I ever imagined." He scanned the crowd. Some were already crying. Others leaned forward, completely still. Love doesn't leave at 6 a.m. Love holds your IV drip. Love pushes your wheelchair to the bathroom. Love doesn't ask for money when you're begging to live. Love stays. And when love doesn't stay, healing does. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is from a girl in Ohio who wrote me after watching my first video. She said, 'I thought I was the only one who got dumped because I got sick. I thought I was the shame, but your story made me want to fight again.'" He folded the letter again. "We are not shame. We are not burdens. We are not stories to be edited out of someone else's aesthetic." Applause began, quiet, then louder, then rising until the entire room was on its feet. John stepped back. The spotlight warmed his skin. He didn't flinch. Backstage, Gavin waited. Liza stood beside him, her eyes full. "He did it," she whispered. "He became his own cure," Gavin replied. 2 hours later, a delivery arrived at the hotel where John was staying. A bouquet of white lilies. No card. Just an embossed ribbon that read, "Always yours, S." He didn't say a word, just walked calmly to the sink, ran cold water, and one by one, shredded every stem into slivers. Some things don't deserve to be buried, just dissolved. Liza watched quietly.
"You okay?" "More than okay," John said. "I'm whole." That night, he uploaded one final video. Just him, seated by the window, city lights behind him, dressed in the same shirt from the event. "I won't be uploading anymore. Not because the story ends, but because it begins again, off camera. To everyone who stayed, even when no one else did, thank you." He smiled once, then ended the video. Then he turned off the camera. John's final surgery was quiet. No live stream, no farewell posts, no countdowns. Just a hospital room, a tired surgeon, and the steady beep of machines monitoring a man who had already fought the hardest part. It was a port removal, the symbolic end of chemotherapy. The oncologist called it routine. John called it release. He woke from anesthesia groggy, but intact. Liza was there, sitting in the corner, sipping lukewarm coffee and highlighting lines in a medical case study. She looked up as soon as he blinked. "Welcome back," she said softly. He smiled, his voice raspy. "Didn't think you'd still be here." "I told you, I stay." That was the thing about Liza. She never made declarations, never demanded. She was simply present, in the good, in the unbearable, in the mundane. She never asked what they were or what they were becoming. She just made sure he never had to wonder if she'd show up. 2 weeks later, he stood at the edge of a coastal property in a quiet seaside town. The house was modest, single-story, whitewashed wood, wind chimes hanging from the porch. The ocean whispered a steady hush in the distance. John signed the papers without ceremony. Gavin handled the legal part, of course, meticulous as ever, down to the zoning restrictions and flood insurance. "Are you really doing this?" Gavin asked, as they shook hands. "Yeah, I want to live somewhere that doesn't echo her name. And this house echoes yours instead?" "Not yet, but it will." Gavin didn't pry. That was another thing John appreciated about the people who stayed. None of them asked for more than what he was ready to give. Back in the city, things had changed. The case against Sophia had wrapped quietly. Gavin had negotiated a settlement with the court and the insurance agency. Full financial repayment, public apology,
and 1,200 hours of community service working at a terminal patient outreach program. She never reached out to John again. He read about her new life once in a local paper, a feature on court-ordered service and redemption arcs. She had been assigned to assist with emotional counseling for cancer patients in rural hospitals. There was a photograph. She looked thinner, worn down, but still putting on the same smile. John folded the paper neatly and tossed it in the recycling bin. No reaction, no triumph, no bitterness, just closure. 3 months after moving into the beach house, John officially launched the nonprofit he'd been dreaming of through every night he spent alone in a clinic bed. He called it Second Wind. Its mission was simple: provide emotional, logistical, and legal support to cancer patients who had been abandoned mid-treatment by partners, family, or institutions. Not just therapy, but advocacy. Not just funding, but presence. The first person he hired was Liza. "Are you sure you want me involved?" he asked. "You already are," he said. "You've been in the heart of this thing since before it had a name." She accepted, but with boundaries. "You're still healing," she reminded him. "We go slow. No burnouts. No hero syndrome." John agreed. She became the clinical director, overseeing support groups, resource mapping, and a rotating team of trauma-informed nurses and therapists. Gavin joined the board as legal counsel, quietly establishing safety nets for patients vulnerable to financial exploitation based directly on what had happened to John. Within 6 months, Second Wind had a waiting list of over 200. The house by the sea became its satellite office and retreat space. John would sit on the back porch every afternoon and take video calls with patients. Sometimes they didn't even speak. They just sat in shared silence, both understanding what it meant to not be asked to perform strength. One young man, 28 and newly diagnosed, asked him during a call, "Does the pain ever stop?" He paused before answering. "Not all of it, but you grow around it, like roots around stone." That became the tagline of the nonprofit's first brochure. Liza framed it and hung it above the intake desk. They never made it official, him and Liza. There were no announcements, no couple selfies, just gestures. Her hand on his back when he stood up too quickly, his scarf over her shoulders when the ocean breeze turned cruel. Shared grocery lists with scribbled notes like, "Don't forget the good tea," "Lemon for your throat." They never kissed in public. They didn't need to. One evening, John asked her, "Do you ever wonder what we are?" She leaned back in the porch chair, mug balanced on her knee. "Sometimes, but I like where we are more than I need to name it." He nodded. "Me too." The night before the 1-year anniversary of his last chemo, John sat at the desk in his bedroom and opened a blank journal. He wrote, "She left me on the edge of death. I stepped off and found life on the other side." He closed the journal and tucked it away, not intending to publish it. Some stories didn't need an audience. They just needed to be lived. The following morning, Second Wind hosted its first retreat. Patients from across the country arrived, some bald, some recovering, all carrying their version of what John once called the silence after abandonment. He welcomed each one at the door personally. No speech, just presence. Later, while watching them eat and laugh by the fire pit, he stood beside Gavin, who sipped a rare beer and looked unusually relaxed. "So, any final thoughts?" Gavin asked. John looked around. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I didn't just survive. I healed. Without her. Without vengeance. Just by choosing peace. Again. Every day." They stood there a while longer, saying nothing. Behind them, Liza appeared with 2 more mugs of tea. She handed one to John and leaned against the railing beside him. "You good?" she asked. John looked up at the sky, now streaked in lavender and orange from the falling sun. "Yeah, for the first time in years, I actually believe I am." He didn't need to say more. The wind picked up gently, carrying the scent of sea salt and wood smoke. Liza reached out, brushed a bit of sand from his sleeve, and smiled without speaking. Together, They turned back to the firelight and the people who had come to find their own second wind. New Year's Eve arrived quietly at the coast. No loud crowds, no parties, just the sound of distant waves, the soft hum of the old radiator in the hallway, and the faint scent of cinnamon tea still steeping in the kitchen. John stood outside, wrapped in a thick coat, a wool beanie pulled low over his head. The sky above him was velvet black, then suddenly bloomed in gold and pink as the first fireworks burst open the midnight hour. He didn't flinch, just watched, arms folded, breath misting in front of him. A full year. A year since he was left bleeding on a bathroom floor. A year since he canceled chemo out of grief and rage. A year since he decided to live. Not to win, not to prove, but simply to exist without permission. His phone buzzed in his coat pocket. He pulled it out, the screen lit up with one name, Liza. "Still up?" the message read. John smiled faintly and typed back, "Yeah, still alive too." Another firework burst in the distance, this one red and white, fanning out like a flower. He didn't make a wish. He didn't need to. Behind him, the porch light cast a faint golden glow across the weathered wood. Through the window, he saw Liza asleep on the couch. A book slipped from her hands, glasses still perched on her nose. One hand rested on the armrest, still reaching outward even in sleep. He knew what that meant. It meant, if you fall, I'll catch. He stepped back inside, shutting the door softly behind him. The warmth hit him instantly, soft, alive, filled with quiet memory. No more cold hospital corridors. No more white walls that reeked of antiseptic and abandonment. He walked past the living room, past the shelf lined with donated patient letters from Second Wind, and stopped at the hallway mirror. He looked at his reflection, not with vanity, but with reverence. His hair was growing back, uneven but honest. The lines around his eyes had deepened, but so had their steadiness. His body was still tired, still recovering, but it was his. And more importantly, it was free. John walked into the small study, opened his journal, and on the first blank page, he wrote, "This time, I didn't die for love. I lived to outgrow it." He paused and added, "And in doing that, I finally made room for something better." A soft knock echoed from the hallway. Liza stood in the doorway, blinking the sleep from her eyes. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just wanted to mark the year right." She nodded. Stepping forward, gently taking the pen from his fingers, she didn't read what he wrote, just closed the journal and placed her hand over it.